Hi, this is Mr. Manley. In this video, I'm going to look at absolute value in open sentences. What does that mean? Open sentence. Open sentence just means an equation or an inequality. That's all that's going to mean. Absolute value, hopefully, if you recall, absolute value. What you've thought about absolute value before is it means maybe positive, maybe it means something, might mean that to you. Maybe you're kind of thinking opposite is something you think about. Either way, if you see the absolute value of -5, I would hope that you know that that is 5. If you see what's the absolute value of 5, hopefully you don't have the idea of opposite locked into your mind and you would just say, well, that means 5. So the absolute value of -5 is 5, and the absolute value of 5 is 5. A way of thinking about that is what this absolute value is asking, or what it is telling us to do here, is to say how far is -5 from 0. So if we were looking at a number line, and I had 0 here, and I were 5 units over here, and I were 5 units over here, both of these are 5 units from 0. This one's going to the right and this one's going to the left, but they're both the same distance. So that's really that's probably a good starting point for absolute value, is to think about absolute value as distance. And this may be something, I might not be able to get into too much detail in this video on it, but it's something to keep in your mind, that absolute value is about distance. Let's look at these 5. Now, thinking about what you know about absolute value, also what you know about open sentences, if you look at these 5 statements here, look at those 5 sentences, and think, there are a few things going on here, right? One is we've got a variable. And what do we do when we see a variable? We want to solve for the variable. So that's one thing that's going on. Second thing is that we have absolute value, right? And then the third thing is we have all the different possibilities for equals, greater than, less than, etc. So just take a moment and think about that. If what this first equation, what's that saying is what values, so x is some value, what values of x is the absolute value of x equal to 2? So think about that. And would you be able to respond to that? Would you be able to solve that? Well, if x were equal to 2, this would obviously work. If I put a 2 in for x, the absolute value of 2 is equal to 2. So x equals 2 is a possibility. And then based upon what we just looked at numerically with 5 and -5, could you also see that, oh, well, -2, the absolute value of -2 is also equal to 2. So that would be my solution here. The solution to the absolute value of x equals 2 is 2, comma, -2. Both of those are solutions. Okay? Let's look at the second one, and then let's look at the logic of this. Continue to look at the logic of it, and then we'll look at it more procedurally in a moment here. Think about this. Absolute value of x is less than 2. Now, x can be any numerical value, right? So just think about, well, what are some numbers that would work here? Is 2, the absolute value of 2, less than 2? No. No, it's not. Is the absolute value of 1 less than 2? Yes, it is. How about 0? Yes, it is. As we go along these lines of reasoning, students sometimes they really get zeroed in on those formative numbers, right? When you were first a small child and you learned to count and you really got focused on 1, 2, 3, 4, and you forget about all those numbers in between, right? The rational numbers, the fractions. So 1 would work, 0 would work. How about 1.5? That would work too. And what we end up seeing here is that x is any number that is less than 2. It can't be anything equal to 2 or greater than 2. It has to be less than 2. And then I can keep going all the way back down to -1, -1.5, -1.9, etc., and everything down to -2. So just think about that for a moment, and does that make sense to you? The absolute value. So what is any value of x that is less than 2? Absolute value of x that is less than 2. And these are all of them. -2 to 2. Okay. Now, how about this one? Which ones are greater than 2? What values of x are greater than 2? Could you do that? Could you think about that? Something that I might use to conceptualize this is a number line. I might go, well, here is 2, there's 0, there's -2. Now, what did I say about absolute value? I said it's about distance, right? So this sentence here, this open sentence, is actually saying which values are more than 2 units from 0. That's what it's actually saying. There's another way that we could go about this. So let's just finish off this way of thinking about it. So I could have all of these values over here. They're more than 2 units from 0. All of these values over here are more than 2 units from 0. Can't include 2. Can't include -2. Now what I've done here is I've given a graphical solution to this. A graphic solution to the open sentence inequality. Above it, so here I did it graphically. Here that's in set builder notation. What if I did that graphically? What would that look like? That would look like this. It would go from -2 to 2 and everything in between. Let me do the set builder notation for this one, the second one here. So what would I say? I would say x is less than -2 or x is greater than 2. How about that? Okay, and then finally, let's look at these last two. Absolute value of x is greater than -2. What numbers work for that? Just pick a number for x. Pick one. Right? Did you pick, say, 1? So say you picked 1. Is the absolute value of 1 greater than -2? Yes. Yes, it is. How about another number? How about 0? Is 0, the absolute value of 0, greater than -2? Yes, it is. Here, I'll throw in an odd one here. Let's go -3. Is the absolute value of -3 greater than -2? Yeah, because the absolute value of -3 is 3. That's how absolute value works, right? And is 3 greater than -2? Yeah. And now maybe you're beginning to realize that, oh, Well, anything, any value of x. So this is actually all real numbers for that one. And then here, this last one, absolute value of x less than -2. Make sure this might look like an arrow, but it's a less than -2. So let me just fix that so that's clear. Less than -2. So think about values of x here. Like if I plug in a 0, is that less than -2? No, 0 is more than -2. And in fact, there's no value of x that I can plug in here that will give me an output that is less than -2. Because the outputs will always be 0 or positive, no matter what I put in for x. So this one, this is no solution. All right, so that's all giving us an underlying understanding of just playing around with absolute value. Let's go ahead and take a look at this other equation here. So look down here. All right, here we're going to shift gears, okay? Now that we've laid the foundation of what absolute value is and how it works, I'm going to give you a procedural way of working with this. So what does that mean? Well, the way that I'm going to deal with all of the absolute values, I can't think about this logically. Think about the logic of it the way I did with that introduction for absolute value. What I'm going to do here, I could think about it logically, but I don't think it's going to be the most efficient way to work with it. I'm going to say that, well, this absolute value 2x minus 6 is equal to 10 means that 2x minus 6 is equal to 10 is a possibility. And it means that the opposite of 2x minus 6 equals 10 is a possibility. Okay, maybe we could connect that to the logic above, all right? If I take this, let's pull out this x, absolute value of x here, this guy here. So what would be a procedural approach to that would be to say, oh, if the absolute value of x is equal to 2, then x is equal to 2. And I would also be able to say that negative x is equal to 2. The opposite of x is equal to 2. And then when I solve for x there, I get x is equal to -2. So there I get my 2. 2 and -2. 2 and -2. Maybe that could help. Let's go back down to the problem we were on here, right? And then we've just got a couple of equations that we need to finish solving these, okay? So here I'm going to go plus 6, 2x is equal to 16, so x is equal to 8. And then here I'm going to go negative 2x plus 6 is equal to 10. Subtract 6, negative 2 is equal to 4. I need the x in there. Divide by negative 2. I get x is equal to -2. And so I've got two solutions here. X is equal to 8, -2. Okay? So I think that's enough of an introduction to absolute value in open sentences. I'm going to revisit this absolute value in open sentences in another video and look at some additional applications with inequalities.